Hello, college football fans across the nation. Welcome back to another version of Urban's Take with Urban Meyer, the namesake of this thing, three-time national championship winner at Florida and Ohio State, and obviously one of the winningest coaches of all time in major college football. And you're truly Tim May. And Urban, let's just get right into it, man. Number one, big noon kickoff. Where are you guys going to be this week?
Yeah, it seems like we're the Wolverine Network for the last few weeks, and they have a big following, obviously, and they're top 4 team in the country, playing really well. So we got at Indiana. There's a lot of big games this weekend, but look forward to that.
Yeah. Hey, and let's just update people. Last week we had to skip this show because you had a few more important things on your mind, like the health of your house, so to speak. There, right off the Gulf, just west of Sarasota, Florida. Luckily for you, Hurricane Ian went a little bit south of there, but it was touch and go there for you guys. And I know your heart goes out to the folks who, wow, are just dealing with devastation down there, right?
Yeah, that's one of the risks of living and where we do on the water. And I, to act like I really understood a hurricane, and we became experts studying it. And we have so many friends south of us, and that Fort Meyer is in the Barrier Islands and even Naples. A friend of mine in Naples showed 10 feet of water running through the Venetian Village, the streets down there. And
yeah,
I think there's still going to be some discoveries and other things on some of those islands. So it's, my gosh, it's obviously your prayers, and donate money to do the best you can to help those folks down there.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into it here about college football. And you and I, we were discussing before we recorded this thing today that, number one, Ohio State's going on the road for the first time. Number 3 team in the country going on the road for the first time this year. Here it is, the second weekend in October, going to Michigan State. But, you're looking at this Big Ten right now, and wow, I don't think you're impressed after you get past the first 3 or 4 teams, right?
I think it's very top heavy. You got some really good teams at the top, and we'll see how good they're going to start playing each other here in the next few weeks. And that's the Buckeyes, Wolverines, and Penn State. They kind of separated themselves. The ones that are alarming to me, traditionally extremely strong teams in Michigan State. They've kind of had a little bit of a low. I know they had a good year last year, won 11 games, but
yeah.
State now, just for a quick reminder, when Mark D'Antonio was there, and we were hired in 2012, they were top 5, top 10, all those draft picks on defense. Number 1 defense in America. Le'Veon Bell was a tailback, and Cousins was a quarterback, and you're like, my gosh, I mean, as good a program as there really was, and well coached with Narduzzi running the defense. And then you had Wisconsin that had probably about a 15-year run where, regardless of who the coach was, it was, obviously Alvarez, Bielema, Gary Anderson, and then Chryst. And it was a cookie cutter, big, strong lineman, hard to defend, and then tough as nails defense. And then Iowa, always strong. Yeah. And their offense right now, defense is very good. What an environment, by the way. I think Iowa fans are as good as anybody in America. I mean, they're so supportive of that team. Obviously, we experienced it that night game a few years ago, but those 3 teams are traditional top 15, top 17 teams, and you watch them on film and you don't recognize them. Iowa, once again, their defense is outstanding, but their offense is really struggling.
Yeah.
So, and then you got so a lot of teams like a Minnesota who looked really good, and then they got beat by Purdue. But I still think you're going to see some teams, teams at the beginning are much different than at the end of the year. But I'll tell you what, Tim, they better get better. I mean, right now, that's a concern for Ohio State. Ohio State's going on their first road trip to Michigan State, and Michigan State looks like a shell of themselves on videotape. With all the transfer, that for 2 years in a row now, it's just been, and Mel Tucker hit it right last year, and then this year just doesn't look very good.
Yeah. And they've been they've been hurt pretty bad on the defensive side from an injury standpoint. They got 4 or 5 regulars there who are out too, which doesn't help you, right? And then Peyton Thorne, I mean, their quarterback is coming back. You thought, well, he's going to really tear it up, but the weapons around him really haven't been consistent, et cetera. So it is kind of hard to put your finger on what's going on there, right? But I wanted to ask you this, Urban. Paul Chryst got fired this week. I mean, he's the second.
What in the world was that?
Yeah. Well, basically, you look at Wisconsin, on the one hand, you go, what he's done there, over 70% winning percentage. But the flip side of it is the last 2 years, but especially, in the recruiting realm, they've been like 11th or 12th in the league on the ranking side of it. And, like you used to say at Ohio State, hey, if they're ranking people, I want to try to be number one. You know what I mean? No matter what it is, whether it's nebulous or not. But then, man, they look like you talk about a shell of themselves. They look like a facsimile thereof of Wisconsin teams in the past when they played Ohio State a couple of weeks ago. I mean, offensive line and purely in development stage, defense. Wow. I mean, now they're playing against one of the top 3 teams in the country there, but man, it just shows administrators and stuff now, they're not gonna really wait a long time anymore, right? I mean, you look around the country, 4 or 5 guys have already been fired, and it's not even mid-season yet.
Yeah, this was Colorado and Carl Durrell and some of the other changes that you saw made. You understand when this one came across, the respect I have for Coach Chryst in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But I see the same thing. I even watch, because I love to get up on Sunday and just start watching these games because I don't get to watch them during the Saturday. And you're just like, my gosh. I mean, I believe he was coach of the year a couple of times.
Yeah.
I remember facing him at least twice in the Big Ten championship game. And I mean, you talk about just a rugged, tough, well-coached team. And then all of a sudden you see Paul Chryst fired, winning 70+% of his game. I believe he was 5-1 in bowl games.
Yeah.
Or 6-1 in bowl games. Was in the Rose Bowl just a few years ago.
Yeah.
But I've told people, of all the places to go play, not that I liked any of them because they're trying to win, but Wisconsin, the environment, the fan base, I actually love the student body. That's one of they have a lot of fun with the opposing team and that jump around and the environment there. I wonder where they go. I think they want to really try to give it to Leonard, the defense coordinator. I think that's kind of what I'm hearing, is that he's one of their own. He's a great football coach. They got to get that thing going again.
Yeah. But real quick, address this. I mean, because you've seen it around the country. If you let things slip for a couple of 3 years, it's hard to get it back, isn't it? I mean, it's difficult. Look at Nebraska. They've been scrambling to try to become that elite team again for 2 decades now, and it hasn't happened. But just address that, how tough it is to kind of rebuild when other teams, maybe like in Ohio State under you and now Ryan Day, it just keeps going up and up and up from a recruiting standpoint. What I mean? The carrot you're chasing there when you're these other teams, right?
Yeah, Ohio State's an enigma right now because they're the one program that really has not had a downturn. Going all the way back to Earl Bruce to John Cooper to Jim Tressel. We had the one bad year in 2011, but that Luke Fickell was a coach, but he was dealing with suspensions and just a mess. And then we had a nice run. Now Ryan Day's even elevated it with the recruiting, and my gosh, first rounders everywhere, especially the skill spots. You look at Alabama, USC, Florida. There's always been Ohio State's that one that just continues to get better. And to answer your original question, I've never seen it. I've been involved almost 40 years in college football. I've never seen it like this, where if you lose momentum, there's a chance you're going to lose your job. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but no one's asking my opinion. But that's tough, man. I mean, to think Paul Chryst was fired at Wisconsin, that means everyone else just keep your head on a swivel if you start losing some momentum. And I think there's going to be some other ones here popping that it's like a disregard for money right now too. Have you noticed that, Tim?
Yes.
It's like $50 million, and you're like, okay, wait a minute. Is that a result of booster involvement? Is that a result of television contracts, or both? It's just like a complete disregard for buyout. Yeah.
But the flip side of it is too, schools are putting money into the football programs like never before too, right? I mean, generating, et cetera. And, they're paying coaches big time salaries, and you can understand when you look at it from that aspect, the expectation level is through the roof. I mean, everybody wants to be Alabama. Everybody wants to be Ohio State. And they're building the facilities and stuff. But like I always said, man, if you come up with a super conference with 60 teams, boy, half of those teams are going to have losing records. I mean, that's not the way you really want to go in this thing. But
Tim, Joel Klatt said this on our conference call. He said, when you look at this Wisconsin thing, is this Same type of decision Nebraska made several years ago, and they fire a guy named Frank Solich
Yeah.
and Bo Pelini, and the grass is greener. We can go. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, wait a minute. They
Yes.
I'm sure Nebraska faithful would say if there's a way to get the Hall of Famer Frank Solich, obviously he's done coaching, but that was one of those, oops, why did we do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Continuity is everything if you can maintain it, man. If you can, and like you said, but they obviously Nebraska did that because the athletic director at the time wanted them to look more modern on offense, embrace the new, the new realm. And he didn't see Frank Solich doing that, so he goes with a guy from the NFL who had really kind of failed in the NFL, and boy, they've been on the rebuild ever since then. I wanted to ask you this though. We saw Georgia struggle with Missouri at Missouri the other day. That was a week after they had struggled against MAC foe Kent, Mid-American Conference foe Kent State. And I'm just wondering, are you a little perplexed that they're still in the top 2 in the polls after 2 weekends like that? Where, I mean, we can talk about Ohio State and who they played, but Ohio State's won every game by double digits. Their biggest test so far has been Notre Dame, but a lot of people, Ohio State fans, where I'm sitting right here, are wondering why Ohio State isn't at least number 2 in the country after a couple of weekends like that from Georgia. Just what's your take on Georgia right now?
I think they're a great team. I think we've all been there. You won a national title.
Yeah.
The head coach is constantly now fighting I think Nick Saban said that the poison, that just constant pressure on that team. And you're only winning by 2 scores. You went on the road in the SEC and won. Move on. Let's go to the next game. And, here's a guy talking to you that we went through that several times, and I didn't handle it well. You expect perfection, and I got news, Tim, there's no such thing as perfection. You can try as hard as you can and get sick over it like we used to, but there's no perfection. I don't look any value right now, week 5, 6, about who's 1, 2, who's 3. I think there's a separation between those 2 schools. I think the Wolverines are getting closer, but they've also struggled a few times. So I think as long as that rotation, you see the 3 best teams in America. Alabama lost their starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Ohio State's doing this without the best receiver in America playing, the Jigba Smith.
Smith the Jigba, yeah.
So Smith the Jigba, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
you're right.
I don't think the Buckeye fans should worry about where they're ranked right now.
Yeah, you just want to be in that top 4 at the end of the year. That's all that matters.
The problem I have with Ohio State is they're not going to get a challenge for a while.
Yeah.
No, they're going on the road to Michigan State. That used to be a time where you walked in that stadium. That was one of the toughest environments to play in, not just because of the crowd and just the toughness of that environment. The team you played against. Remember that was the most rugged team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, yeah. Under Mark D'Antonio, man, they hit you between the hips and the knees, man. Every play. I mean, you're going to walk out of there black and blue no matter whether you win or lose. And obviously 2012, that was the win. That was the moment in that unbeaten season, that first unbeaten season for you at Ohio State, where you guys didn't get to go to a bowl game that year because of the transgressions previously by another staff. But the bottom line is that was the game that put you over the top, that not just kept the win streak going there early in that year, but that's when your team became a team, wasn't it? I mean, didn't you feel that coming out of that?
Yeah, that was the famous when we did the toast, and they still do it. Championship water, we called it, and it was just to go backwards a little bit. They lost their coach, a guy named Jim Tressel, one of the great coaches of all time, and we come with a different way of doing it. And Zach Bourne was our leader, and we had a lot of resistance. And we were awful those first 4 or 5 games. I mean, we should have lost to Miami, Ohio. We ended up winning. Should have lost to Cal, overtime with Purdue. And we went into that one, and I saw a transformation of a team, and it carried over to the next few years being the national champion and winning. I think we went 3.5 years without losing a Big Ten game.
Yeah,
won 30 straight conference games, and that was with a team that won 6 and 7 prior. To me, that was the one where that was a watershed moment. That was when we crossed the Rubicon, all these statements, but that's when the program changed in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you didn't lose a Big Ten game until the Big Ten championship game in 2013 against Michigan State. It's funny, isn't it? Michigan has been more of a thorn in the side of Ohio State almost than Michigan, and in the last many decades, and it's really cool. I mean, you never know when a team's going to come together one way or the other. But I wanted to ask you this, you know better than anybody about losing your number one quarterback and then losing your number two quarterback. But what is Nick Saban facing this week and that staff as they get ready for Texas A&M? What is the challenge of probably Bryce Young not playing because of that shoulder situation? Yet they had that Jalen Milroe kid come in, a freshman, and boy, after he got his feet under him, looked pretty stout, but he looks like a much different quarterback than Bryce Young. But what's that challenge this week for Alabama? If in fact they have to go with the Milroe kid, of not really changing much about your offense, but featuring what he can do best.
That's exactly it. And that kid took your breath away when he started running.
Yeah.
And so, Bryce wasn't that kind of runner, but he still ran.
Yeah.
But Nick Saban's a smart coach. They have an excellent coaching staff. They're going to do what that quarterback does well. The question I have is who's behind him now. That was always, when Braxton Miller went down, and then also we had JT Barrett. Okay, we had no idea that he'd become as good as he was. And then, the guy behind him ended up winning a national title, a guy named Cardell Jones. So
yeah,
it really challenges a play caller about not putting that quarterback in harm's way, because I don't know what's behind. I imagine there's a good player, but this quarterback right here seems to be an electric on his feet. But that would always be in the back of our mind as coaches. Especially when Cardell Jones became our quarterback, we didn't run him very much. Firstly, he's not that kind of player. And second of all, the next quarterback on our roster at the time was a kid named Jalon Marshall, who was a wishbone quarterback in high school. And here we are trying to make, that great run in, 14. And you don't have, if he goes down, we're running a wishbone.
Yeah.
Sprint out pass. That's all we would practice, because that's all he could do.
Wow. Yeah. Jalen Marshall, otherwise wide receiver on that team. But I wanted to ask you this, Urban, following up on that. As a coach, I would think, when you decide who your starting quarterback is, you can't help but have in mind, how this guy's going to drive the car as opposed to the other two or three guys behind him, right? I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Because you obviously, like CJ Stroud is a special talent. JT Barrett was a special talent in his own way, but so was Cardell. But you just have a vision of how the offense is going to go, and now all of a sudden you have to change that up, right? I mean, you have to like sort of forget about woe is me and just get on with business, right?
Yeah, and I made this comment on Big Noon last week when you saw Blake Corum have that career day.
Yeah.
I called it the unsung hero is Mike Hart. You watch that video, and that's a running back coach. Corey Dennis is the quarterback coach at Ohio State. I think Bill O'Brien might be the quarterback coach at Alabama.
Offensive coordinator.
Coach is when you look at the success, and that's why I'm so great. Think of the coaches we had. I was fortunate enough to have all those stops along the way. I mean, Kyle Whittingham to Ryan Day to Dan Mullen. We had not good coaches, elite coaches, and it's so easy to evaluate. That's the coordinator's job, and the quarterback coach job is the head coach's job to oversee it. And the same is opposite. When we really struggled, in the assistant coaches pool. Something was going on. The coaching staff was not performing. It's head coach's responsibility.
Yeah.
So when you see a great performance like the Blake Corum, and I saw the discipline of the way he held the ball, the pass protection, the jump cut, I was like, that looked like a Stan Drayton coached or Tony Alford coached back, which I think those guys are not good coaches. Those are great coaches. Now, I'm not going to say names, but you can see around the country and even Ohio State, when all of a sudden something starts struggling, it's so easy to blame the player. I never blame the player. It's what the heck are we doing? And that's where you got to really admire when you see performances. It's not just that player, it's that relationship with his position coach.
All right, let's get right to it. I mean, wow. TCU at Kansas this week, a battle of unbeatens, a battle for supremacy in the Big 12. I didn't have that a month and a half ago. I don't know if you had that a month and a half ago, but how impressed are you by these two teams? And also, like we were talking about a while ago, how quickly things can change in college football, right?
Yeah, I think that Lance Leipold, I don't know him.
Yeah.
He won 6 national titles at a smaller school, went to
Wisconsin
Buffalo.
and Whitewater. Yeah.
And then now I watch their teams. They are really good. This quarterback, he's a top five. To me, he's a Heisman candidate.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a thing on the big noon kickoff about their red zone production. They're top in the Big 12. They're top. I think they're top 6 or 7 in America in the red zone production.
Yeah.
This quarterback's a freak, and the way they, the term equate numbers that we used to use all the time. That's exactly what they do, and it's so fun. It's really, really well coached. That is a very good team. That team, I don't know if you start saying playoff, but that team. I have not studied. I'm going to actually study TCU today. Obviously, they're very good, but this Kansas outfit, that's legit team.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, by the way, I think you're impressed too what Ohio State has done from an offensive standpoint too. I mean, competition can be better, but they're 25 out of 25 in the red zone. Last year weren't quite that good, and stuff, and they've scored 23 touchdowns in that. And then defensively, they've also gotten much better in the red zone. You can see the changes Ryan Day made on his staff paying dividends, can't you?
Oh, you sure? And that was hard. You think about the changes he made, and obviously I'm still very close with Ryan, and that rips your heart out, when you have to do, but you're, as the head coach, you're charged with putting the best product you can on the field. And that is really, that's something I struggled with. I think I really only fired one coach in my career. I just really felt that we could fix things. And for the most part, we had some issues, and I think Ryan Day's done a great job. I'll tell you what they do better than anybody in America right now, and I'm going to do this on Big Noon Kickoff. Ryan Day, when I hired him, and immediately I saw one of his strengths. He's got many strengths. He attacks coverages as well as any coach I've ever been around. I told people he could actually probably be a secondary coach. That's how much he understands what's going on in the back end of a defense. And right now, Ohio State's the best team in the country, pushing the ball down the field.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter the coverage, and obviously the players need to execute it. But once again, Ryan Day and then Corey Dennis and Brian Hartline, the brain trust behind the downfield passing attack, it's as good as anybody in the country.
Hey, and I wanted to ask you this. You just piqued my interest there before I get to the final point, the checkmate moment of last week, and see what you think about it. But when you watch Meyer and Williams run, you like those guys that play with violently and stuff. Obviously Travion Henderson's dealing with a foot problem that's kind of made him off and on, being ready, being available or not. But you've got to like what you see from Meyer and Williams, I would think. Just number one, his ability, but then number two is his want to just take on to a certain extent contact when he can, not shy from it. What just has impressed you about him?
What I don't like is his style. I love it. And when you have a quarterback, CJ Stroud's not they don't want him to do the JT Barrett, the things we do with him. He's more of a Dwayne Haskins, Cardell.
Yeah.
Of it. He does some of it, but that's not something you want to live with.
Yeah.
He's so other things. So what happens is when you have a quarterback he's not real involved in the run game, there's going to be extra hats in that box. And Meyer Williams he was like Carlos Hyde. Carlos Hyde had that great, and Zeke did, but they were bruised. Your job is to make one guy miss. Now, some people have the ability to do it with lateral, and this guy gets his shoulder pads down, and he's a bull, and he just runs through those tackles. So I think he's exactly what the doctor ordered for this offense, because you're not involving the quarterback in the run game.
Yeah. Hey, last thing, checkmate moment. I was thinking about it, you were thinking about it and stuff, and I just go back to when you have a battle of unbeatens and it's going down to the wire. And I'm thinking about Ole Miss and Kentucky last week. And, I'm looking at my facts here about that play, but it was like 1st and goal at the 12-yard line. Kentucky had gotten a penalty. It scored a touchdown on the previous play, but had gotten a penalty for illegal motion. And really, when you looked at it on replay, not only was it illegal motion, they were in an illegal formation. They only had 6 guys on the line of scrimmage, but it is what it is. The touchdown got called back. There's 55 seconds left. Defensively, you got to have somebody step up and make a play, right? And that kid comes off the edge, the defensive end, and knocks the ball out of Will Levis's hand as he's about to throw a pass and stuff. Just that was a pretty good checkmate moment, wasn't it?
It sure was, and I can promise you, the Stoops at Kentucky and the coaching staff, that'll haunt them for years. I mean, I'm still haunted by the 2015 Michigan State game. You know,
Yeah.
When you see unforced errors, and that's what it was. You know, it's different when you got mano a mano and there's, the game of football. That kid's good too. You know, a guy out jumps a corner for a play. You know, that's the game. But a penalty not aligning right, once again, you can't blame the players. Did you cover that enough in practice? Did you do that play enough? And here I am talking about it because it just drives you insane that why was that not covered more?
Yeah.
And if you did, all of a sudden you look at the scoreboard, you won that game against those teams are really good, by the way. Ole Miss and Kentucky are really good. But you're right, the checkmate moment, I used to talk about that. I know a lot of coaches do. And you'll hear it say big time players playing big time games when your numbers call. We used to call it competitive excellence. And the term is we actually stole it from the great John Wooden. He called it competitive greatness. But when your number's called, you have to go make that play or we lose.
Yeah.
And you saw a player make that play and they won a game.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, nobody talks about it better than Urban Meyer, Urban's take. Urban, I enjoyed it once again, man. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Tim.